Azzy, and welcome back. It's the Music Stupid. I picked 6 records this time, and I don't know about you, but as you age, when you celebrate a birthday, you start reminiscing about your life gone. It passes by much quicker than you think. So I want to go back, since we're about to end the summer of 2025. I want to go back 60 years to the summer of 1965. And I selected 6 albums here. All of these I got that year, or at least some variations of this. One, I got a single, but I'm showing an album just to represent that single, because it's a pivotal single in my history. And of course, anybody who's watching this, who's into rock and roll history, it's definitely a pivotal song and a pivotal record in most of your history, of your growth in music. And if not, you need to rectify that immediately and buy that. So the summer of 1965, the end of that summer, I turned 11 years old. What a time. I was playing guitar. I had been a drummer. I switched to guitar. Actually, I was still playing drums then. That's right. I was still playing drums. The end of 66, I would switch to guitar after that tragic final Beatles concert at Candlestick Park. Tragic for me and them, because I never played again. Another story for another day. It's all over my other videos. You can hear that story ad nauseum. But I want to start with a song that came out in 1965. Now, these are records that came out in June, July, and August. And except for this first one, these are all American versions. But this album, I'm showing a reissue of the British version. And the album is The Angry Young Them. And of course, Them featuring Van Morrison. I think on their next album, he would get the featuring slot, his name all over. I mean, I am a fan of Van Morrison musically. What a great, great artist. I've had my issues with certain things, but I can't, I'm not going to deny that how I love his music, and his music in the late 60s into the 70s, the kind of jazzy, folky stuff he did. And then in the Bay Area when he lived up in San Anselmo, Marin County, fantastic things. But 2 songs on here really represent garage music, the record of this summer, one of the great records of the summer, and that's Gloria. Of course, Gloria had been covered by every single garage band. In 66, my garage band played it all the time. Everyone did Gloria. Van Morrison had that kind of gritty, soulful, swampy vocal on that. And there's that long version. I think it was edited for a single where they took out Going Up to My Room, Knock on My Door. I think that was, I don't know, would that be called censored? Am I misremembering this? Someone who has the single still, I have it, but I pulled this out because this is a reissue of that album. And I love that song. What a great record. Garage band music was really starting in 1965, all over that summer. Great singles. But most of those bands, including them at the time, I didn't buy the album, it was about singles. Into the 65, 66 psychedelic garage stuff. It was about the singles. And many times, as interesting as those albums were, they disappoint you. But this, I didn't get till years later as an album. And it's a fantastic album. But the other song that our band did do at the end of 1966 was the, we did it as an instrumental, but it's Mystic Eyes with that great guitar lick. And then Van says, Mystic Eyes, and there's that whole kind of, I don't want to say scatful, but a really great vocal on that song. But we did it as an instrumental, the band. And actually, the guitar player that played with us could do that quite nicely. But I wanted to show this record because that came out, the single in America in June 1965, or the album, actually, 1965, the American version of that album. See, I want to be precise because I get called when I make a mistake. Now, another record that was a pivotal record and a transformative album, the whole folk rock scene exploded, mainly because of the Byrds version of Mr. Tambourine Man, the Dylan song. This is a later copy. I have many copies of this, This is a mono copy with original Kmart 268 sticker, which is about the price it would have been in 1965. I did get this album in 1965, a different copy of it. This is when Columbia did those two eyes there, and I don't know if you remember, those of a certain age, they came in these plastic Ziploc inner sleeves at the time. But what a great, great record. I mean, that 12-string guitar that Roger McGuinn, he was Jim McGuinn at this point, took from George Harrison after seeing A Hard Day's Night the prior year in 1964. And the Byrds started coming from the folk scenes, the whole LA thing, house band on Sunset Boulevard. Totally a great, great, great band. This is a picture of the Byrds with Bob Dylan, I believe in LA. I think that was in LA. But not only that, you have the great single, I Feel Like a Whole Lot Better, the original single that Gene Clark wrote and sang lead on. And he was the one that got the publishing, the royalty money more than any of them, because he was the songwriter at this point. They weren't really writing a lot of their own songs. They were covering these songs. Of course, like Spanish Harlem Incident, basically a cover or an update of the traditional British folk song, The Bells of Rimney, which is one of my favorite songs. Of course, another Dylan song, All I Really Want to Do, and then Chimes of Freedom. And then, of course, the classic Oldies, We'll Meet Again, that end of World War II song. But an incredible record here. I just adore anything by the Byrds. If you followed this channel, you know one of my top 3 bands of all times. And in 1964, this changed everything. They were, in a way, aside from the Beau Brummels, who also had their second album come out the summer of 1965. They were like America's answer to the Beatles, but they did their own take on things, and folk rock began, which is great. I mean, a big fan of that music. Then an album that's not one of their great albums, but I did see this. Of course, in 64, Hard Day's Night was the summer movie. But in 1965, Have a Wild Weekend came out, the Dave Clark 5. Now, this movie was nowhere near as successful. I don't know if it's officially come out on VHS or DVD or on home video. I do have sort of a bootleg copy of it. It is not a great film. Interesting enough, it was directed by a young British director at the time, John Boorman, who would go on to make some great films. Zardoz, I love that with Sean Connery. Deliverance, he made Excalibur. There's a whole story about the final scenes in all those movies of hands coming out of the water. So John Boorman directed this. Now, this has some hits on it, too, like Catch Us If You Can. What else is on here? If You Come Back, On the Move, Don't You Realize, excuse me. And not to be confused with Decades Later. Do you realize? If you know it, you know it. Having a Wild Weekend, them in to kind of cash in on the Beatles things, but they were one of the big bands. They were like the second big band after the Beatles of the British Invasion, and I got really into them. In fact, 2 of the records I'm showing here were the first rock concerts I ever went to. One of my friends' parents took us down the peninsula from San Francisco to the Circle Star Theater in San Carlos, a theater in the round with a rotating stage. And I can't remember the third act, but the opening act was Sonny and Cher, or at least before Dave Clark 5. Dave Clark 5 was the headliner. Sonny and Cher was on it. But this soundtrack, to Have a Wild Weekend, I wouldn't call it one of their best. And of course, we know Dave Clark really kind of screwed them out of their records never came out on CD except Greatest Hits records, but the catalog never came out, and it's really tragedy that it hasn't come out. Speaking of the middle act, I believe, or the opening act, depending on my memory, I should have looked this up, but Sonny and Cher. And I did get this album because I love this single. I Got You, Babe was and is one of the great singles of the summer of 1965. Of course, Sonny Bono and Cher. Sonny Bono comes from that Wrecking Crew LA production scene, right out of the school of Phil Spector in all that. Wrecking Crew backing this, but Sonny Bono produces this and does the arrangements. But that record is such a killer record, I Got You, Babe. And there's pretty much all cover songs on here. Unchained Melody, that would have been a big hit. That was a big hit for the Righteous Brothers. Phil Spector's Then He Kissed Me. Was that the Ronettes or the one of those bands that Phil Spector produced? One original by Sonny Bono, It's Gonna Rain. 500 Miles is on here. Let's see what else. Let It Be Me, of course, a huge hit earlier for the Everly Brothers on here. And You Really Got a Hold on Me, the Smokey Robinson song that I first heard by the Beatles, and what a great record that is. So this is a cool album, and it does hold up if you like that. But that single, that is one of the great singles, I Got You, Babe. You know, there's other records that I haven't included here because Capitol was issuing Beatle records all the time. And of course, earlier that summer they put out, or was it May maybe, Beatles 6, all those kind of hodgepodge collections. But the summer, I believe it was in August, the soundtrack to Help. Now, obviously, this is the American version, the UK version, which I wouldn't hear for maybe 3 years later after 65. So about 68 is when I first heard the British version, and that's a whole song album. This is a soundtrack, and I love this as a soundtrack. It has that James Bond-like, it's not the James Bond theme, gritty guitar playing. I think it's the same British guitarist. Someone's going to put his name, I'm sure, in the comment section, that played the Goldfinger, the James Bond theme. That's that same guitar player, that twangy, almost like Jaguar Jazzmaster sound. I'm not sure what he was playing. But I love this as a soundtrack because this is one of those albums that turned me on to classical music. Now, of course, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is not on here. It was in the film of Help with the tiger scene when they're singing the Ode to Joy of the Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. But Prelude to Lohengrin by Wagner, Act 3, is on here. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And some kind of Indian takes and on their music. And just a fantastic soundtrack. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a tiff because George Martin didn't score it. Ken Thorne scored the incidental music. And I liked that they mixed the incidental music. That's what a soundtrack is about. Obviously, the British Hard Day's Night and the British Help are not soundtracks. They're songs from the movie, then another side of songs. But what a great album. I love the music, obviously. To me, Help is an incredible song. And I tell you one thing, those of you who've just recently got the Beatles monobox, for whatever reason, side one of the Help in mono is not good. You need that in stereo. So if that's the only Beatle music you have, get a copy of the British Help in stereo. Of course, all these fantastic photographs. Just great music. What a fun record. And of course, I learned from this movie who Elias Howe used to be. And I'm going to end with, again, the greatest single of 1965. I bought the single, and then I bought the album, and that, of course, is Like a Rolling Stone, came out in August of 1965 by Bob Dylan, produced by Bob Johnson, except for Like a Rolling Stone, produced by Tom Wilson. I have a video I'm working on about Tom Wilson, that great producer, that'll come up in the next week or two. Some people, this is his best album. This is probably number 2 for me, but it switches between this and Blonde on Blonde. But it's an incredible record. Ballad of a Thin Man, what a great song. Queen Jane, Approximately, Highway 61 Revisited, Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, and the great Expansive Desolation Row that goes on and on and on. All the musicians on here, of course, Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper. You got Harvey Goldstein on bass and Charlie McCoy on guitar, who Dylan would work with in Nashville on subsequent albums. But this is the second record of Dylan where he was toying with electric amplified guitar instruments and everything. And it's a classic record. You cannot not have this record in your collection. So 1965, 60 fucking years ago. Oi, am I old? But I love this music still. This music holds up. Every song on there holds up. And these were the songs that were played on AM radio then. It's before the whole AM thing started happening in 1967 in San Francisco. But AM radio was really a mix of all kinds of music. Yes, there was all the Motown, and there was all this, stack soul stuff and R&B stuff, and it was mixed in with schmaltzy and Schlager stuff too, and Frank Sinatra and other things. But these are the records as a young boy that really spoke to me in 1965. Here's just 6 of them. Thanks for watching again. Mazzy loves you. Happy summer. Goodbye, summer. So long, summer.